Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Welcome, Beth.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show, Tricia.
Well, I'm so excited to learn more. So today I'm talking with Beth H. Macy about Moscow Knight's Return. Knight or Knight's Return?
It's Knights.
Knights.
Moscow Knights happens to be a wonderful Russian song, very haunting, very Russian.
Okay.
So it's sort of a play.
So a play on words there that not everyone would get, but if they knew the song, they would. Right?
Yep.
Well, I want to jump in and talk about, do you want to talk about you first or your book? Because you have a very cool history. I don't want to say history, but life. Well, I found it cool. So, and maybe what led up to writing this book.
Oh, sure.
Do you want to jump into first?
Yeah, life has not been boring. Let's put it that way. I've done a lot of things. I spent most of my career in high tech, working with many different companies: Apple Computer, Lotus Development, IBM, a lot of startups. And what I love about that is I got to travel a lot and meet I don't know how many different people and learn a lot about business. But I'm also a licensed mental health counselor. Yeah, that was one of those things where a friend said, "You'd make a good therapist." And I thought, "Oh, that might be fun." And I got a wonderful tax return at the same time. And it was like, "Oh, great. Let's get my master's in therapy and counseling." And so I did. And that's been a very interesting piece of my career, part-time. And then another time, when you work with a lot of startups, you they don't all succeed, so you have some time in between to do other things. And so another time, a friend of mine said, "You'd make a great personal trainer." I guess I'm a little suggestible. So I went and studied and became an ACE certified personal trainer. I've always had a love of exercise, as has my mother always was taking us out walking and bike riding and playing tennis, and I bless her for that now. And so there's been these combos of careers and partial careers that have, I think, really served me well when it comes to writing. Because through the therapy and the high tech, able to really take a look at people and get better character development. I also was, of course, in the military. I'm a veteran, and so I spent 5 years in the Navy. That was my I blame my stepmother. "Oh, you should go in the Navy." Okay. But I was trained to be a teacher, and I was a math teacher for a while. But I thought, "Oh, do I really want to be?" Because it was sort of fated. My great aunt was a math teacher. I was supposed to be a math teacher, and I thought, well, what else is there to do? And I'm a very responsible person. So friends of mine were backpacking across the United States, and I thought, well, I can't do that. I have to do something to earn money, right? And so I went in the military. It's not just a job; it's an adventure. Join the Navy, see the world. Hook, line, and sinker. But it I'm retired now. I still train people in my personal training. I train people in my running group. I train friends free because it keeps me active. It keeps me taking my courses. I'm still licensed as a therapist. I still take courses for that. I believe in learning and keeping your brain going. And there's nothing like writing for keeping your brain going. Right. It's an amazing process. I'm also an artist. I do art, display my art, and it's in collections. I come from a family of artists. My older sister is so accomplished. She's in New York as an artist. So she's great. And I do landscapes. We had an early agreement. She was going to do people and portraits, and so don't go in that area, right? So I do landscapes. She does people, and it's a love of that creative. I love creating something from nothing. I mean, as we talked a little bit previously, I'm painting a friend's house right now, and I love doing construction. I love those types of things, and so I think all of my background has brought me to this career as an author right now. So
yeah, that's really neat. I think to succeed in business, a lot of it is that people. I mean, you have to know the industry and the technology and have that background knowledge, but so much of business can be people and knowing how to interact and bring a team together that works together. So a lot of those are people skills, and that would lead directly into how do you write characters that are complex, and what are their motivations, and what would they do next, and how would they react in certain situations, and having all that fleshed out. Yeah, and I was
exactly.
reading your bio, and yeah, I also had this, and I think it says something about being perfectly right brain and left brain. I'm like, yes, this person, you epitomize that.
Well, when I was at Lotus, they put us through a whole battery of tests. And one of the tests that they did put us through was left brain, right brain test. And I came out just perfect on both sides. I do have both of them. So, and I enjoy doing both, which is even better. And I have not had, while I was working, even though I think people involve both sides of the brain. But I was too much, focused on the technology, and I felt struggling inside to get all of this stuff out, all my creativity out. You should see how many paintings I've got going now, and the books, and I think that's what happened with this first book. Even though it's not my very first book, it's the first book in this series, Moscow Nights Return, is that it just felt like I had to do it. It was there, it was inside, it was waiting to come out. And once because I alternate between the computer and writing, once I put pen to paper, it boom. I didn't stop for 3 months. I was just like boom, 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 and then was like, whoa, what do I have?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I start writing, like, it consumes me. Like, if I'm driving in the car, I'm thinking about what I just wrote and what I need to tweak, or I'm thinking about the next scenes that I'm going to write and making sure that all my characters are staying true to themselves and I'm staying true to my characters. And it kind of takes over my life. So yeah.
It does. I dream about it, and I'll wake up and I'll say, no, Elder wouldn't have done that. And rush to the computer to correct whatever scene I had written, because it wasn't true to my character. You live them, and they become alive for me. And they sort of push the writing in different directions. I remember I had in book one, I had one scene that I had spent months, just really researching, because there's a lot of research that goes into some of this stuff in the books, and researching it and planning it and saying, yes, that this will be the perfect escape route for Elda and Karina. And Karina went, no, I'm not going. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not going on a submarine. I'm not doing that. And it was like, oh, come on, come on, really. I got everything planned, and I had to plan something else.
Wow. Okay, well, let's dive into the book now. We know a little bit. Elda and Karina are your main characters, it sounds like.
Yes. Well, Elda is the protagonist, Elda Ainsworth, and she was a Cold War spy, and she's currently semi-retired in this book. And the American government activates her because she had become friends with this Russian translator, Karina Fedorov, and Karina was an extremely good translator, is an extremely good translator, and translates at the upper level in the Kremlin, right? So she knows where the bodies are buried, literally. And so at some point, there's a bit of a change in management in the Kremlin, and they decide to clean house and get rid of those that do know these secrets. And Karina gets tipped off, and she's very, Elda is very loyal to the United States, and Karina is very loyal to Mother Russia. And but she decides she's got to get out of town, and she needs help. And she doesn't have any idea how, but she figures every American has to be CIA. Right. And so
if you're in Russia, yes, maybe.
Yes, that's what you think. You're right. And so she figures that she will reach out to her friend Elda and see if Elda can give her some advice or help her in some way. So Elda is activated to go over to Russia and get Karina out. And also Karina is married and has 2 little dogs, and of course she wants the whole thing, right? And so there's really Elda has been in Moscow before. There's memories of past operations that come through as she goes in there. It's not the most comfortable place for her. And Moscow can be a very scary place, especially if you're in there as an American spy, right? And she ends up with an assassin, Anatoly Petrov, who is run by an old nemesis of Elder's, this man Tosh, and so Anatoly is chasing Elda and trying to kill her, and also trying to kill Karina. And there's other players in the mix.
Right.
And Elda is alone trying to make this happen, because the balance between the United States and Russia, you can't just send the whole army in there, right? So it's up to her to get Karina out, and also to figure out how to get her husband and their 2 little dogs out. So what I like, of course, they end up going in many different locales, most of which I've been in, and just think are really fun places to be. So there's a little bit of a travel log as you go chasing through these beautiful places. But what really got me on characters coming alive is I started out with Anatoly as this really big mean guy, and then it turned out he likes pastries, and and somebody who just really enjoys these pastries can't be all bad, right? So so you start to see little bits and pieces even of the assassins, and to me that's kind of fun to see these are I wanted to write, I've always wanted to write a spy novel. Don't ask me why.
I was gonna
Maybe
say,
it's,
why spy
yeah,
novels?
why? Well, I think part of it may have been I grew up and the Cold War was going on. And also, I've been in the Navy. You pick up some things while you're in the military. So I think, that adds to why I wanted to write a spy novel. But when I thought about doing it, a lot of the spy novels, and I'm not putting any particular one down or anything, but a lot of them are just bam, bam, chase, bam, bam. That it is the thriller template, right? Keep everyone excited and going. And I was feeling you could keep everyone interested and still have it be a page turner, but have people in there, because spies are people, and even assassins are people. So I, and I have known, of course, as a therapist, you meet many different people. I've known assassins. Yeah, so you get to see that they're not all black and white on how they present themselves. So I wanted to have people that were fuller characters and have a book that would appeal both to males, because it's got guns and it's got killing and it's fast paced, and but also to the female that tend to, and again, these are generalizations, people cross these boundaries, but tend to like to learn a little bit more about the people. And the feedback that I'm getting from both men and women that is that I produced a page turner, which for me is like, wow. My first editor said, you can write, because you had to be sort of like juried onto her client list. And she said, you can write, and she took me on as a client, and then I think she taught me how to write. But it's just thrilling, it's fun.
That sounds great. Yeah, I like some action, but maybe cliche, but yeah, I love the character development and seeing what happens to characters and learning what makes them tick, and having that unique perspective of knowing people in these roles would be a good way to bring that into the book. So it sounds really neat.
Yeah, and you can have some fun with it. I've just sent book 4 over to the editor, and in that, not giving anything away, but the Kremlin needs more assassins, and so this guy decides he's going to interview assassins, and so everything's set up like a high-tech interview would be, except you're interviewing assassins. But how else do you bring these guys on board, right? You have to figure it out somehow, and so he's hiring assassins, and it's just I had fun with a scene where that's happening, and so you can have, I think that there's some humor in all of my books. They're not comedies in any way, but these people make jokes while they're running around killing people, but why not, right? There's such a thing as black humor, and sometimes in the darkest of times people make jokes, and these people do.
Well, how else would you deal with that is my mindset. Like, you have to do something with it, right? Besides just think about what you're doing. At least for me and my my sense of right and wrong, probably.
Well, that's the interesting thing as we look at someone like my protagonist, Elda. She's very straight-laced with a huge sense of what's right and what's wrong, which, as she's grown into her role, gets interpreted and brought into her love of country, but she's still got this right and wrong, and there's sometimes when she really has to compartmentalize, because otherwise she would be overwhelmed with the reality of what's going on for her. So it's interesting how each individual, depending on if they're psychotic or not, but really how they handle this whole thing of you're running around killing people, right? Bottom line.
Right. Yeah. So I want to hear all about the series, but before that, I have one quick question.
Yep.
Did anybody tell you to write a spy novel?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
So this was your own thing.
This is my own thing. This is the first time it wasn't somebody's idea. Oh, Beth, I think you should write, or I think you should write a spy novel. It's just like, I got to do this. It's in here. It's interesting because as an artist, you start with a blank canvas, and that canvas develops and fights you as you go along, and finally you have something hopefully that you're pleased with. And the whole process of writing a novel is that on steroids, because you start with a blank page. Oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to get to 70 some odd thousand words or 400 some odd pages? Right. And so I just let that go. It's going to happen or not happen. But it does it. There are times when it starts to fight you. And I find those times I have to go back and take a look at where I've been going, what my characters are doing, because if it's fighting me, I might be going in the wrong direction for the book.
Right. Fine. Well, tell me about the rest of the series. So it starts with the Moscow Knights Return.
Yes, Moscow Knights Return. So I have my background on blur, so you might not be able to see all of it. But and then Moscow Misdirection. You can see all my books. I have a nice, snappy black and red and gray and white. And then there's Moscow Madness, book 3. What happens in that one? And I don't have, all I have is a manuscript for book 4, but book 4 is Moscow Moles.
Okay. Do you picture this as having an end to the series, or you're just going to keep going with these characters as long as they inspire you?
I'm going to keep going as long as they inspire me, because I thought book 1 would be the end. I got this book inside me and let it go. And then I found out very shortly after that there was too much left. So I figured, okay, there'll be book 2, and I held book 1 back so that I could get the consistency between the 2 books. And then book 3 happened right after book 2. While book 2 was being edited, book 3 was happening. So all 3 of them had to be done at once, and so that way I could ripple edits back and forth, and also look at the consistency of the characters and so forth. And I at that point I thought, okay, it's a trilogy, good. Right. And then I had to catch up. But my sister arranged an art show for us. We used to do the when my mother was alive, the Macy Woman art show, and we'd show my grandmother's paintings, my mother's paintings, my oldest half sister's painting, and mine and my sister's, and we showed all up and down the East Coast of the United States. But when my mother died, we stopped doing it, and my sister decided it was time to pick it up again, and she invited me and our oldest half sister to do a Macy Woman art show. And I thought, I don't have any recent work, so I had to paint up a storm. And apparently while I was painting up a storm, book 4 was percolating, and right after the show, boom, I started writing again. And I was like, okay, well, there's 4 books in the series, and and now there's rumblings still. So I have a feeling there'll at least be 5 books in the series. Who knows?
I was going to say, if you're like me, I can't let go of my characters.
I know it. Well, and it's like, it's interesting because in a spy novel, people die. And so it's interesting to see what's going to happen with certain characters. Will they go on to the next novel? I have one friend who wrote me and said, "Don't you dare let my favorite character die." So I didn't ask her who that was, because then I'd be on the hook,
the person die, right?
Yeah. Don't tell me. Don't tell me who that is. I don't want to know.
Yeah, it was funny. I talked to a horror author one time, and she was talking about the wrap up in her book. She was like, "No, everybody dies." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, you can't kill everybody, because what are you gonna do next?" But that's horror, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's horror. Yeah. Yeah. The neat thing about my books too is my sister's I guess a more gentle soul than I am, and she said, "Oh my God, you're writing about assassins and guns and all right." And then she picked up the first one, and she's like, "Where's book 2?" You know. So she was pleased that she could sleep at night, except she kept waking up to read more, like what's happening next. But it wasn't anything that's intrusive to people's dreams or leaving people in horror. I think as a therapist, I couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes the political books are unnerving to me, especially if it's about terror or terrorist attacks or things like that. Obviously, growing up a 9/11 young adult, I guess, and living in Philly, like I start to read any of those political ones that are about terrorist attacks or anything like, and I'm out. I'm like, no, I don't care what the character development is. I can't live in this space, right? But I think I could do like Cold War spy novels, because that's so offset. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we used to have these raids and have to get under your desk. Like that would save you.
Oh, yeah, that will help you.
Yeah, that'll help you. I'm sure the radioactivity won't go under the desk, or the radiation or whatever.
Yeah.
There, right? But I could probably do a spy novel.
Yeah, well, there are some current day things that sneak in, because these are set in the current day, but the techniques used by these people are Cold War spy techniques. And I think it was a fascinating time, because it wasn't all blow everything up. It was more one-on-one, right? And more wrapped around drops and passing things surreptitiously in Gorky Park and those types of things. Disguises were big during that time period, and Elda is a master of disguises, so that's kind of fun too, is to play with that. So to play with how you can use the Cold War techniques in today's world. And I actually do think that that's what some of the things they're coming to, is the fact that everything can't be electronic, and that electronic leaves too big a trail to be able to trace.
That was my thought. Like, if you have something electronic, it can be detected or traced or recorded or something that you can be found then, right?
In fact, Tosh and Elda, being old Cold War spies, do not keep all of their files online. They actually keep a lot in physical file cabinets in their head. Tosh has a photographic memory, so he can easily do it. But because they don't trust the electronics and the ability to tap into things, but they also do use hackers when they need them.
I was going to say, and having an IT background would be great for that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun, because I can use that too, and to use some of the IT knowledge and weave that in.
Neat. And I think I went on your website. I think you had two other books maybe prior to Moscow Nights.
Well, yeah, I wrote Many Years in Many Worlds, which after my mother died, I found in where she kept her rakes and everything, this airmail leather box that, we had envelopes in it, but instead it had airmail letters in it. And they were all letters that she wrote home when she was overseas. She wrote home to her parents. And my mother had flown overseas to marry my dad. And my dad was working for Alaskan Airlines at the time, and Alaskan Airlines was going broke. So it had contracted out to the newly founded state of Israel to fly refugees into Israel. Mom was over there. Now, this is a woman, as I knew her, that wouldn't leave New Bedford. And here she is over, in the Middle East, acting as co-pilot for dad, writing about these people who are coming onto the airplane for the first time, lighting fires so they can cook, and mom's stamping them out, and, just fascinating, the little view I got into who she was, and I consider it quite a gift, because at that time the letters went for a 3-month period of time, and the months matched where I was month-wise after my mother's death. I wrote what I was feeling. And then I decided, and because I was going to 2 therapists at once, and it was so funny because I didn't tell the other therapists I was going to see them. But as I'm working through my grief, I figured a lot of people bury their grief, and bury how they're feeling. And so I thought I'll just put this out there in the hopes that it helps someone else who's going through grieving the loss of their parent, especially the mother-daughter bond. There's a father-son bond and a mother-daughter bond, and in the hope that maybe someone will get something out of it. And I have received letters from people thanking me for that. There was one review too who said, "Oh, she cried all through it." Well, of course I did. What do you expect? That's what it's all about. So if you don't like crying, don't read it. But if someone has lost someone, or just interested in a different view of, my mother treated where she was in the Middle East as a shopping expedition. She bought furniture in Hong Kong and sent it home to her parents, right? Good for her. That's that book. I just shoved it up there. It had no editor. That's it. And then I have written an open source book for high tech. It's about Scrum, and it's called Mindful Scrum, because one of the things I noticed is that high tech tends to rush and push, and everything's an emergency. And when I was in it, I used to tell people I wanted to be the kinder, gentler manager. And so I was doing a parallel of how to bring mindfulness into what you're doing in a software development process, which is what Scrum is. And so I wrote that and just put it out there, open source. And then the other thing I wrote early on, my very first book, I wrote a program learning textbook for mathematics. And a high school actually used it. It never got published, but they thought it was really neat, and they used it. So I guess I played with it, played with the whole writing thing for years. So, but this finally feels like I'm an author.
Well, I hope so. I mean, you have 3 books published, the 4th one coming out, and ideas for the 5th one. So you definitely are an author now.
I don't know. Maybe it's just mainly females have it, but I think some males do, is sort of like the imposter syndrome of you just fake it till you make it. So very often I start new things that I think I know nothing about, but I apparently do know a lot about. And I feel like I'm throwing myself off a cliff. And then all of a sudden I wake up and I go, oh, I could do this. So, okay, fine. Yeah, okay. So I think I'm
confident at this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm an author now. Yeah.
Very cool. So this is my favorite question to ask authors. If there's one thing that you want readers to take away, we'll talk about Moscow Nights Returns and your characters in that series. What do you want your readers to experience or take away from these books?
That is a great question. I think, one theme that goes through the books is that the Cold War never ended. And I think as we do look at the world around us and look at what's happening under the scenes, there's a lot happening under the covers, right? And so it's just nice to not worry about that, but to be aware of it. This is the world we live in. And I think the other thing is that people, even when they have huge differences, such as Tosh and Elda, they can still see each other as people. And they're actually, through the books, growing in that way. So I think it's really, you can believe a different thing or even be pitted against someone. But if you can see people as humans anyway, it really gives a whole different view. You can still accomplish your mission. You can still do what you need to do. But I think it's less of a, it's really appreciating who the other person is in doing what they need to do.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like you set up Elma perfectly from that, as describing her as that black and white, right and wrong character, but then maybe experiencing these other people on different sides of the street, maybe as being human too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I've loved learning about you and your books and your right brain, left brain balance. I didn't learn about my left brain until I was like 40. So I'm always impressed with someone that realized that about themselves before that age.
Yeah, I've been a slow learner on many things. So yeah, here I am. I can finally write.
Well, thank you again for being here, Beth H. Macy. Tell people where we can find you and your books.
Oh, okay. Pretty easy. I have a what I call my Uber website, bethmacy.com, BETHMACY.com. And that links off to all the rest of my websites. I do have one website, Moscow Nights Series.com, that links off to the separate books and talks about the series itself. As people look at the websites, please forgive any errors in them. I've been hurriedly coding them up myself.
Oh, wow.
But I think that's a great place to look for them. For those people who like Amazon, the books are readily available on Amazon. Just Google Beth H. Macy books or Moscow Nights Return. They're also, for those who don't like that, they're on Ingram Sparks. They're on Google Books. They're on Apple Books. They're even Walmart online and Barnes & Noble online. So you can find them many different places. There is a very talented author called Beth Macy. She's from Roanoke, Virginia, and she writes an entirely different genre. But I know occasionally I get contacted for her, and I'm sure she gets contacted for me. So that's why the H is important.
Okay. Beth H. Macy.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for being here, and we will look forward to book 4 coming soon.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on again.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Nice meeting
Okay.
you.
Nice
Bye.
meeting you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.